One thing I was praying really hard for this week is you parents, you people that have kids would come, because today we're talking on disciplining, spanking kids. And this is something we speak here on at least once a month anyway, whether it's in the text or not. No. I mean, the last time I spoke on this was last time I was in Hebrews, probably 10 years ago or so. So it is a topic. We happen to find ourselves in Hebrews chapter 12, verse 3 through 11, and God's guide to disciplining children. The last time we were together, we saw those first couple of verses about running the race and keeping our eyes on Jesus, the author and the finisher of our faith. And he says, think about it. Jesus had to endure the cross, despising the shame, set down at the right hand of God. Now, these Hebrews are thinking about leaving Christianity, going back to Judaism, because they're being isolated and they're being persecuted, and it's going on for a long time. It's getting hard. And he is now saying, don't just get your eyes on Jesus, the author and the finisher of faith, but compare what you're going through, the hardships you're going through, with the hardships Jesus had to go through. Because we are to follow Jesus. And Jesus says, they persecuted me, they're going to persecute you. If they had no problem calling me a demon-possessed guy, they're going to have no problem calling you that. So I want you to not be stumbled. I don't want you to be taken unaware by this. The world only loves its own. And because you're no longer of the world, because you're now of my world, they're going to hate you. Even if they didn't want to hate you, they're going to hate you because they're not of the Spirit, but of the flesh. And we find here in verse 3 through 11 today, it goes from comparing Jesus and the sufferings, if you would, the chastisement, the discipline, the spanking on Jesus for our sins. Did you know Hebrews 53 says Jesus was spanked for our sins? It literally says the chastisement of our well-being fell upon him. And so he's using this to compare. And so let's read the whole passage. It's rather lengthy today in verse 3 through 11. For consider him who endured such hostility from sinners against himself, lest you become weary and discouraged in your souls. You have not yet resisted to bloodshed, striving against sin. And you have forgotten the exhortation which speaks to you as to sons. My son, do not despise the chastening of the Lord, nor be discouraged when you're rebuked by him. For whom the Lord loves, he chastens, and scourges every son he receives. If you endure chastening, God deals with you as sons. And what son is there whom a father does not chasten? If you are without chastening, of which all have become partakers, then you're illegitimate, not a son. Furthermore, we have had human fathers who corrected us, and we paid them respect. Shall we not much more readily be subjected to the Father of spirits and live? For they indeed for a few days chastened us as seemed best to them, but he for our profit, that we may be partakers of his holiness. Now no chastening seems joyful at the present. I used to tell my kids, it hurts me more than it hurts you, and it was true. It was no fun for anybody involved. But it's painful. Nevertheless, afterwards, it yields the peaceable fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it. So let's break this down and look at verse 3 and 4. For consider him who endured such hostility from sinners against himself, lest you become weary and discouraged in your souls. You have not yet resisted to bloodshed, striving against sin. So compare whatever you're going through with what Jesus went through. Jesus was perfect. He never wronged anyone. But yet they called him a criminal. At some times they actually said he was a drunkard and a glutton. When he went home, he's this famous speaker. He's this famous rabbi now. And he goes back to Nazareth and they said, oh man, listen to those words. We hate him. Let's throw him off the cliff. There was no honor in his own hometown among his own relatives. They tried to trap him. They tried to embarrass him. This had to hurt. But one of his 12 guys, only 12 guys were picked as disciples, and one of them betrayed him. That had to deeply cut. They mocked him. They beat him. Then those people that he loved and healed, even raised from the dead, cried out, crucify him, crucify him. And then on the cross, they mocked him. Consider what Jesus, who was pure and holy without sin, who was the righteous Son of God, what he went through for a life. Isaiah 53 says his entire life looked like a man who had been smitten of God and afflicted. And nobody esteemed him. And it actually talks about his looks. It says his looks were comely. Jesus was on the ugly side. I know the pictures don't bear that out, but Isaiah 53 clearly says it. He was from Nazareth. He was a fix-it man. He wasn't rich or talented. There's nothing to draw, but yet the multitudes came because the truth is what we need. And the truth sets free. And Jesus spoke the truth. So consider Jesus' sufferings and then look at your sufferings. You know, what's the old saying? The man complained who had no shoes until he saw the man who what? Had no feet. It's true. We feel all sorry about our struggles because we're so selfish. We're so self-consumed. But if we can look at the sufferings of others, I think we often would say, thank you for my troubles. They pale in comparison. And if we really know the story of Jesus and understand that perfect Lamb of God without spot or wrinkle and all of the abuse he went through, did you know none of his brothers believed in him? And at one point, his brothers tried to talk him into going to the feast, knowing the Pharisees had a trap set to grab Jesus and kill him. His brothers knew it and tried to get him to go up openly so he'd be killed. Yeah, right there in John 6. So we see that it was not a happy life. It was a difficult life he had. But yet he was perfect loving, kind, merciful. Romans 8:17 says this, and if children, then heirs, heirs of God, joint heirs with Christ, if we suffer with him, that we may be glorified together with him. And so we are called to walk as Jesus walked, and much of that is in the difficulty that this world brings us for standing up for Christ and Christian values and not flying under the radar, but we stand firm on being Christians. In 2 Timothy 2, verse 11 and 12, it says, this is a faithful saying. If we died with him, we shall also live with him. If we endure, we shall also reign with him. So don't become weary and discouraged in your souls. You've not yet resisted the bloodshed. Jesus sure did. Jesus bled much. The crown of thorn upon his head, the nails in his hands and his feet, the piercing in the side, being beaten with the whips, his beard being plucked out. Jesus, paying for our sins, was horribly tortured. And he was an innocent soul. We're not. I mean, there's just sort of a sense You know, if some guy comes run up behind you and smacks you and runs off, and you're like, why did he do that? There is some sense going, there's about 100 times I should have been smacked and wasn't. So I'm sort of ahead of the game. But that guy did not hit a completely innocent person who didn't need to be smacked. The reality is, I needed to be smacked a bunch of times. I got away with it. Jesus never did anything wrong. So we may have social pressures, we may have economic pressures for being Christians, but they did not shed blood to obey the will of the Father as Jesus did. Sure enough, they were counted as heretics amongst the Jews. They were counted and hated by the Gentiles because they were Christian. They suffered social opposition, physical persecution. But now the author reminds us, Jesus' sufferings were far greater. Get your eyes on Jesus. Follow him. Part of following Jesus is suffering as Christ suffered. When we consider Jesus and what he went through, it begins to make our complaining ring a little hollow. Well, in verse 5, it tells us now in Hebrews 12:5, and you have forgotten the exhortation which speaks to you as sons. My son, do not despise the chastening of the Lord, nor be discouraged when you are rebuked by him. So he says to them, some of your sufferings are actually not persecution, not dumb luck. It's actually God allowing these trials, difficulties to come into your life because you need them, because you need to change. Your character is not right. Your attitudes are not right. Your complaining, your bitterness, boy, bitterness is next week. Whew. Bitterness is the main bullet in Satan's gun. His number one plan is to get everybody bitter. If he can't do that, he'll do the other things, but he'll keep coming back to the bitterness. That's next week. And sometimes the only way to change is through pain. And we are being disciplined by God. And he says plainly in this passage, everybody gets disciplined. Nobody does not get disciplined. We understand. God is not bringing judgment on us. God is not punishing us. No parent disciplines a child should be punishing their child. We are bringing consequences. We are bringing discipline. And that discipline involves instruction. How does it look? Sometimes it's just God stepping aside and allowing the difficulties of the world to come our way. And it's a part of his plan to suffer because it will instruct us. Sometimes it's even stepping aside to let Satan take a crack at us. Read the book of Job. You say, well, did Job know it was the devil? He had no idea. And I think a lot of times when we're being disciplined, we don't know if it's disciplined from God in the way that we want, but we do know it's a trial and we need to grow. We're not the person we should be. That becomes evident. Or we can look at our life and see patterns of sin, patterns of weights, patterns of foolishness. And we know they need to come to an end, and we're not going to bring them to the end of our own, but these trials will bring them to an end. And so we do know that God allows that. God is not the author of evil. We learn that in the next book in James. God doesn't bring evil, but he can allow evil men sometimes to oppress us. I think of Pharaoh. He allowed Pharaoh for almost a year to bring havoc on the children of Israel. And all of this was to teach them to trust the Lord in a way they didn't know about. So this speaks to us as sons. This is what he says. You guys have forgotten that you have a relationship with God as a father to a son. Now, all of these are anthropomorphic statements. In other words, they're human experiences, and we attribute them to God to help us understand. So sometimes it says God is the husband and the church is the bride. Sometimes it's a friend to a friend, right? Sometimes you have zoomorphic, God's like the chicken gathering the hens. But in this anthropomorphic statement, he says, you need to understand that God is our Father and you are kids. And you forgot that. You just said, oh, God's up there, we're serving God. No. It's important that you stop and recognize he's your Father. Of course, Jesus taught us, how do you pray, Jesus? How do you pray? I don't think it had dawned on these disciples before. I don't think in Judaism, all their years of being Jews, that it ever dawned on them to pray to God as their Father. But Jesus said, teach us to pray. And Jesus said, okay, here's the first thing. Our Father who art in heaven. Bing, 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 bing. Whoa. I talk to God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I can talk to him, and he's my Father? Yes. I think that was new revelation. Even though it was in the Old Testament. A matter of fact, in Proverbs chapter 3, verse 11 and 12, this is the passage that the author in Hebrews is quoting. My son, do not despise the chastening of the Lord, nor to test his correction. For whom the Lord loves, he corrects, just as a father the son in whom he delights. Job said this in Job 5:17, behold, happy is the man whom God corrects. Therefore, do not despise the chastening of the Almighty. Don't fight against it. You know what you'll learn if you fight against God? You win. Prodigal son's like, oh, I'm going to leave home. Give me my money. I can't wait till you die, Dad. Here it is, son. Go. You're going to find that God's gentle and lowly of heart. And he also respects your choice. So if you put your foot down and you want your will, you got it. But imagine if you did that with your kids. Your 8-year-old says, I'm going to go to bed when I want to go to bed. I'm going to eat what I want to eat. I'll go to school when I want to go to school. And you say, okay, son, you raise your own self from this point forward. I do not think it's going to go well. I think it's going to crash and burn pretty quick. So he is saying here, allow this to happen. Don't reject it. Don't fight against it. This is not God rejecting you. Hardship, discipline in your life is not God rejecting you. It's God loving you. It's a sign that God's treating you as a child and not some kid that lives down the street, right? I mean, the other day I was in a store. I was trying to buy some tennis shoes. And this child, I know he's learned how to do it. He was with, there was 4 of them. He had older brothers and sisters. And the older brother did something to upset him. But he decided there was some little thing by the cash register he wanted. And this kid, to this point in my life, screamed louder than any kid I've ever heard. It was piercing. And the mother is trying to tell the older son, stop it. You're antagonize him. And the kid screaming. And finally she just didn't even try to buy what she was going to buy. She just walked outside, the kid still screaming. And to her credit, she said, nobody's getting anything. We're leaving. But he was screaming so loud. And I think he learned, if I punish my parents, they will obey me. And I've seen kids, all kids, try to do that. But boy, did I want to spank that kid. I mean, I was this close going, if you are wondering when to spank your child, this is it. Yeah, we need to spank our kids. They need it, and it's loving. And all of us need to be spanked. And if you're not getting spanked, then it's a sign that you're not one of God's children. So don't be discouraged when he disciplines you. Verse 6 says this, for whom the Lord what? Loves, he chastens and scourges every son, every one of them, whom he receives. I am so thankful that God has not left me as he found me. I am so thankful that when I came to be a born-again Christian, that God said, okay, let's move this ball forward. There's some change of character, change of attitudes, change of thinking. There's some roots of bitterness. There's some bad language. There's some carnal thinking. There's some stinking thinking. There's some immature and foolish habits. And we are going to together, Father and Son, work this out. And of course, I'm like, I love that plan, and it's just a painful plan because God says, I'm not going to let you go. So the English word here, chastening, is simply spanking. But interesting, in the Greek, it's not just about spanking, but it's more about training. And the actual word means to bring from immaturity to maturity. The parallel word in Hebrew is the word to physically discipline. In Proverbs 13:24, it says this, he who spares the rod hates his son. He who loves him disciplines him promptly. Proverbs 4:1 says, hear, my son, the instruction of a father, and give attention to know understanding. So he whips, spanks every son whom he receives. Now, I just want to take a moment and say to you parents, you need to spank your kids. It's in the Bible. You say, well, psychologist so-and-so, Dr. Spock, Dr. Freud. And I just got to say to you, I'm a Bible guy. Okay? I honestly got my college education, and I did study those guys. I had a very liberal education in philosophy and religion, and I studied Freud and Jung and a lot of other philosophers. And I'm telling you, they're all bankrupt. The one thing you learn about the philosophies of men, they all end up in a black hole. None of them end up with a happy ever after story. And so I can just simply tell you, I'm a Bible guy. Dr. Spock says, you know what? Jesus says. Solomon said, the wisest man in the world. And so if I make a mistake, it's because I've stayed with the Bible. Now, I will say people can take a verse out of context and make it say whatever they want. I'm not talking about that. We need to take it in context and take it what it says. So I want to look at 10 different proverbs that talk on this. You guys ready? The first one is Proverbs 13:24. He who spares his rod hates his son. He who loves him disciplines him promptly. This is talking about the person that withholds discipline is actually being a neglectful, unloving parent. The rod, it brings physical, not punishment, but physical correction, physical guidance, firm boundaries. You're preventing the child from continuing harmful attitudes. You're stopping them from all their foolishness and the root of foolishness actions. And so God did an amazing thing in creation. He put this big ball of fat right in the middle of our backs. If you measure from your heel to your head, you'll find right in the middle is your buttocks. And you can smack that thing, and it's like electricity going to your, right to your brain. And you can smack it really hard, and it's just a big bunch of blubber back there for the most part. Worst case scenario, you'll get a little bruise back there that'll heal. But it is a perfect sense that says, whoa, there's pain in that decision I made. And I would tell my kids, look, I get to bring this pain for your foolish decision or your sinful action or your rebellious way for a very short time of your life. And then one day you're going to drive off. And when you do that foolish thing, there's not going to be anybody there to whack you in the butt to give you that. You're going to have to be a self-disciplined person. So my job is to give you as many shocks as possible to relate foolishness, rebellion, harmful, bad attitudes, unbiblical attitudes, bring pain. So my job is to consistently bring pain when you do the foolish thing. And one day you do the foolish thing and the pain won't be there. And that's going to be a day that is going to be scary for you. And so with kids, again, I remember as a very young pastor of 24 talking about this. I was in Proverbs, and a lady came up afterwards and said, I just want you to know, my father beat us, literally beat us. I can remember him beating me and throwing me in a closet, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I am so sorry. I should have talked more about what discipline, spanking is versus beating. And I've heard parents say, oh great, teach your kid not to hit by hitting them. Yeah, if you're hitting your kid, you're wrong. Spanking is not hitting your kid. So when I'd spank my kids, and one, they would always try to tire me out before they really did foolish, rebellious stuff. Because they're like, okay, Dad's too tired to discipline us. We can get away with a lot of stuff. And so it was always work to discipline. Because it was a process. It was, that was wrong. You're getting a spanking. Go to your room. Especially if I was angry. I'd never want to spank them out of anger. Go to the room. And I have learned, people don't change from knowing what they did wrong. They need to know what they did wrong and then what they should have done instead. And so there's instruction. There's teaching. Go to your room. You're going to get it. And, of course, as they got older, I'd have to say, and don't put on 3 pair of pants. I'm going to check. If you got 2 pair of underwear and 3 pants on, you're going to get a spanking for that. And I never was one of those guys that pulled their pants down with their butt exposed. I never did that. But either way, I never used my hand. The rod, the Bible never says that spank your kid with the hand. Oh, hand is love. Reach out your hand. It's not, whoa, you're going to hit me? No, it's the rod. So there was a definite rod. And take them to the room and say, okay, do you know what you did? And usually, they're not in a talkative mood. They're going to get a spanking. So I have to explain to them, here's what you should have done. And if I could think of a Bible verse, which I usually could, I would try to give them a verse with that. And then I would pray with them that they would do what's honoring to God, because that's going to prosper them in life. Not being a fool, not being a foolish or rebellious person, but being a loving, kind person. And then I would spank them. It was a very controlled environment. And I'll just tell you, 2 of my boys had such a pain tolerance. I mean, it wouldn't matter how hard I hit them. It was like, did you hit me? I don't even know. They were never going to give me the satisfaction of causing them pain. When they were younger, they were like, as soon as you'd start to hit them, I didn't even hit you yet. They're trying to play the psychological game on me. And it's like, no, that's not good. You scream, I'm going to spank you because you scream like that. You take it like a man. And give them that licking. And like I said, I don't think it really did anything more than having to take up the time with them getting spanked, and they hated sitting on the bed till I came and hearing the lecture and all of that. But often, especially when they were younger, I'd give them that spanking. Whether it hurt them or not, it broke their hearts. One of my kids, Just the word spanking would break him. I mean, just weep and weep and weep. He didn't even actually have to spank him. It was just say the word spanking. It broke his heart. But then we'd just have this wonderful cuddle time, or I'd hug him and hug him. But all of that took a while. And I'll tell you, I had 3 boys and a girl. Didn't have to spank the girl too much. Well, those 3 boys, I mean, I developed some serious muscles. Cheryl actually hurt her shoulder, and permanently. And I said, no more mom spanking, it's dad. Of course, it's a hard thing going, when your dad gets home, he's going to find out what you did, and you're probably going to get spanked. And it's sort of like, oh boy, dad coming home is sort of a serious event rather than a joyful event, but that's, it's a season you go through. But anyway, it's a measured, thoughtful, consistent. Consistency is the key. Rebellion doesn't get a spanking one day and does get a spanking the next day. And I might add, it's not over mistakes. Kids make mistakes. If they accidentally spill their milk, that's one thing. But if they pick their milk up and they throw it at you, and it goes all over the kitchen, that's another thing, isn't it? Secondly, we come to Proverbs 22:6. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. So it does talk about how it will set a pattern that will last a lifetime. And generally, I wouldn't say 100% of the time, when a child gets out on his own and he goes astray, that he will finally hit the wall and say, I know a wiser, less painful way of living, and come back to walking as a Christian in his adult life. Thirdly, Proverbs 23:13 and 14. Do not withhold correction from a child, for if you beat him with a rod, he will not die. You shall beat him with a rod and deliver his soul from hell. So again, this is where those kids are screaming, ah, whether they're in pain or not. They're just trying to get you to stop and make you feel guilty like you are killing them. And he is saying here, no, don't play into their games. And again, I do think that most parents feel bad about spanking their kids. I never felt great about it. I never liked it, And so it's not like you walk away feeling good. It's sort of a lose-lose, I had to take the time up. I'd rather be playing with them, I'd rather be coloring with them. I'd rather be reading them a story, not going in their room and making them sit there and giving them a lecture and spanking them. And I don't want to do that. And so, again, I think there's reasoning where it's like, hey, you don't let the world confuse you on this point. You're not hitting them, teaching them to hit. You're spanking them. You're not punishing them. You're disciplining them. You're instructing them. And part of that instruction means you bring pain to their prepared buttocks that God has created for this very purpose, to cause them pain, for them to learn there's a wiser way to live with less pain. But he makes it clear here. Unchecked, sinful tendencies will grow and turn into bad habits. And those bad habits will turn into greater consequences the older they get. And you, parents, are the one that can stop those bad tendencies now. You're the one that can stop them before they turn into habits that bring great consequences in their later life. The next one is Proverbs 29:15. The rod and rebuke give wisdom, but a child left to himself brings shame to his mother. So the spanking is a wise thing to do. It brings rebuke. It's saying, yes, I'm correcting you and instructing you with my words, but I also am going to bring pain into your life, because this is what God instructs. And you need to realize that this pain coming into your life is something that's telling you to wake up and be wiser, because what you just said was either rebellious or foolish, completely unacceptable. And so, if you don't do this, I guarantee you, your child later on will struggle with authority and struggle with moral responsibility. I was a chaplain in a prison for 4 years. And it's true. I did not, they say 80% of guys in prison didn't have a dad in the home. I was in the prison for 4 years, and I taught and discipled and even had a Bible college in there with hundreds of prisoners over those 4 years. I never met a guy that had a dad in the home. It was more like 100%. And a lot of those guys in prison, they tell you, I just got tired and I got caught. I finally just got caught. It's like I knew I needed to be punished. I knew I needed to have a judge be a dad figure and spank me, putting me in prison. It's interesting how the soul knows. And so you dads in particular are the wall. You're the boundary. You're letting them know this is unacceptable. I know through the years as being a youth pastor, being a pastor, you end up being a lot of people's dads. Indirectly, not trying to be. I'm just saying you end up filling that role. And I remember on many occasions taking teenagers aside and grabbing them by the collar and putting them up against the wall and say, you don't understand what you're doing or what you're saying and how it's affecting others. So I'm going to help you now. When you come in here with that bad attitude, it affects the entire youth group. You're a leader. You're a follower. When you say that joking thing, we're not in here to joke. We love jokes, but there's a time to tell jokes and a time not to tell jokes. Or that's an inside voice, that's an outside voice, and you were using it inside. Or you want attention. That's why you were making fun of those girls, or why you slapped that guy upside the head. That is not the right way to get attention. Let me tell you how to get attention. And so many times, there were just missing pieces of the puzzle. And you've got this 14, 15, sometime 38-year-old whose little soul is screaming, going, there's missing pieces of the puzzle. And I can't find them, and I don't know where to get them, and I don't know. And I'll tell you, the church and the Bible, getting taught verse by verse of the Bible, can often fill in those gaps. But man, you wish that there had just been a dad early on, right on the way. So the time they get, even into, 7, 8 years old, when they start getting a little bit on the feisty side or more, that they understand the situation and they have respect for authority. Well, I'll tell you, I think my kids learned to never, when they saw me come unglued, and especially in teenage years, and I was on top of them in a heartbeat, and I'd have them up against the wall, it's when they disrespected their mother. If they said one disrespectful thing, that I was flying out of my chair, and my arm was at their face or their throat, and I'm letting them know, you know what? She's my queen. She's my bride until the day she dies. You're your mom for a little while, but in this house, she rules, and you will never disrespect her. And, they tested every once in a while to see, and they had the same response. But they learned respect. They knew respect. Proverbs 29:17, number 5. Correct your son, and he will give you rest. Yes, he will give delight to your soul. A child that's been disciplined and corrected, not oppressed. If you're beating them and harshly treating them, then it's like, oh, they're this perfect little child. No, they're oppressed. You've literally oppressed this child into obedience. That's not healthy. You want them to express themselves. You want them to have their full personality. You don't want them to be oppressed. But at the same time, if you want a delightful, respectful child, a child is respectful to adults. And a child is a joy to whatever group, if it's in school or sports or, a family reunion, wherever you go, it's like, yeah, your child is welcome. Can I bring my child? Your child, yes. They're welcome. Your child is the delight. Number 6, Proverbs 19:18. Chasten your son while there is hope. Do not set your heart on his destruction. I'll tell you, I have seen parents, and sometimes the kids are 5 years old, and they're like, I don't know what to do. My child, I tell them what to do, they spit in my face. I'll tell my child what to do, and they'll fall on the floor. I'll be at the grocery store, and they literally start screaming, don't beat me, or whatever, when I don't even spank them at all. I've seen parents try to not go the non-spanking route. It does not work out well. And then that child turns into a teenager, and they're literally just counting the days that they leave the home. Don't be foolish. Well, I don't want to be mean to I don't want to have to hurt my child. I don't want to have to be the disciplinarian. Yeah, you know what? Your child doesn't need a friend. They need a parent. And as a child in his early infancy, the parent's job is often a negative job. And nobody wants the negative job. Everybody wants the positive job. But this is what it takes to get the foolishness out of the child. The seventh thing is Proverbs 15:32. He who detains instruction despises his own soul, but he who heeds rebuke gets understanding. The parent needs to teach the child to receive it, and to say, you know what? You're going to go to school and get rebuked. You're going to go sports and get yelled at. You're going to go have a job and get chewed out. You're going to go in the military and get screamed at. All of these things, you need to listen and say, what am I missing that I need to start doing differently? Don't say, my boss is an idiot. My teachers don't know anything. That guy, that commander in the military, he shouldn't even be in his command. You don't want to be that guy, because all of a sudden the police officer who pulled you over is an idiot, and then the guard in the prison's an idiot, and you're eventually going to be put in a place where you're saying everybody in the world's idiots but me. But the point is, you need to respect authority. And if you do not learn to do that, you will destroy your life. So help your child to not despise instruction and rebuke. Proverbs 17:10. Rebuke is more effective for a wise man than 100 blows on a fool. Proverbs goes on and says, a true fool, you can beat him and he remains a fool. The only hope in beating the fool is the other fools look on who aren't as foolish, going, I don't want to be that guy, and they change. But a true fool, beating him doesn't even help. But the guys that aren't as foolish, hopefully will see that fool having such a hard life and say, I don't want that hard life. But you want to create your child to be a wise person who listens and receives. And nobody likes it. Nobody likes being corrected. Nobody likes being stretched. Nobody likes being told. I remember my first boss. I'd get there at work 1 minute before it started, and then I'd get my apron on. It was a chicken shack. I'd get my apron on and find out what's going on. And 10 minutes into it, I could really start working. And he just pulled me aside and said, if you're on time, you're late. All that stuff, I shouldn't have to pay for it. You should get here 15 minutes early before you punch that clock. Get your apron on, find out what's going on, seeing what's going to be done. So when you punch that clock, you are working. I hated him saying that. I told the other guys, what do you think about that? Oh, I think it's wrong. Oh, everybody hated that. And then I realized when I talked to a few adult men going, that's the way I was raised. You're 15 minutes early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late. And I realized, okay, this seems totally wrong to me, but they're right. And now, of course, as I grew older, I'm like, that is correct. That is correct. That is being other-centered rather than self-centered. That's looking out for my boss's interest rather than my own interest. That is a good character to have. The ninth thing is Proverbs 22:15. Foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child, and the rod of correction will drive it far from him. This is true. Every human being, we're born in this world sinners. Every one of my kids, they could barely walk, but they'd look at my wife's beautiful plants. Rip them out, Anything they could break, they would break. It's just, that was their right out of the womb, mode. And we'd have to correct them. No, you do not touch that plant. And they would learn with a smack on their hand, or a little smack, or discipline not to do this foolish thing. And you realize right from the womb that foolishness is bound up, and inch by inch by inch by inch, day by day, a consistency over the years, that foolishness is got out of their life. Proverbs 29:15, a child left undisciplined brings his mother to shame. This is the truth. You end up calling mom saying, Mom, I hate to tell you, but I just got arrested for this or that. Hey, I hate to tell you, but I just got 5 years for this or that. Or, hey, I just got to tell you that I just got fired and my wife left me and I'm at a rehab center. And the mother, hoping for great things for their child, is having to hear things that bring her sorrow. So I just want to go over those 10 things quickly with you once again. Here they are up on a list. Be consistent with the boundaries and consequences. Proverbs 13:24. Start early with teaching and guidance. Proverbs 22:6. Use gentle correction with love. You always want to say, this hurts me more than it hurts you. I love you. I don't want to spank you, but I am ordered to do this, to bring pain into your life, to make you wiser. Proverbs 23:13-14. Ephesians 6:4, in particular to dads, says this, and you fathers do not rebuke your children in wrath with anger, but bring them up in the training and admonition of the Lord. You don't want to be getting angry at your kids, yelling at your kids, screaming at your kids, slapping at your kids. You don't want to have an angry home. Nobody's going to grow. They're only going to be oppressed with that. Colossians 3:21 says this, fathers, do not provoke your children, lest they become discouraged. So again, it's not about, you're an idiot. You're never going to amount to anything. I can't believe you did that. That's the stupidest thing. I never did anything like that when I was a kid. When you did. Nobody needs that. And this is where a lot of times people say, oh, look what Christianity teaches you to do. It's like, no, Christianity does not teach that. Well, it says in there to spank your kid. There you are. The Bible is our archaic book telling you what they would do in the, dark ages. It's like, no, read it all. It's there. And I didn't even read all the Proverbs on discipline, by the way. Number 4, encourage obedience with a positive reinforcement. Teach wisdom through discussion, not just punishment. Number 6, model the behavior you want to see in your own life, Proverbs 17:10. Show grace alongside discipline, Proverbs 19:18. Maintain a loving and firm stance, Proverbs 29:15. Redirect negative behavior early, Proverbs 22:15. Create a safe, structured environment, Proverbs 22:6. We send out the notes the night before or so everybody has the notes if you want to read over them. And this particular information I got off a website that I found a lot of other good information on it. And I put that link in the notes for you to go to. Well, just let me finish reading the last few verses and make a comment and we're done. In verse 7 and 8 of Hebrews 12, verse 7 and 8, if you endure chastening, God deals with you as with sons. For what son is there whom a father does not chasten? But if you are without chastening, of which all have become partakers, then you are illegitimate and not sons. So again, we want to listen. We don't want to fight. We don't want to be foolish and say, I don't want to hear what my dad has to say. Proverbs 13:1 says, a wise son heeds his father's instruction, but a scoffer does not listen to rebuke. Proverbs 15:5 says, a fool despises his father's instruction, but he who receives correction is prudent or intelligent. Some I'll just make a note. Some have had a horrible father in their life or no father in their life. And when you start talking about parenting or fathers or even God as Father, it can produce a really horrible image in their mind because of their earthly father. This is a very, very common thing. And I would simply say to you, wash yourself in the water of the Word, and you will come to know God as your Father. And whatever negative things you have about being fathers in your life and hateful fathers or hurtful fathers or drunken fathers or cheating fathers or aggressive fathers, that you'll be able to get rid of all that extra baggage and just see the beauty in a father. Part of the reason you had a bad dad is because the knowledge is intuitively in you from God what a good father is. Well, verse 9 and 10 of Hebrews 12. Furthermore, we have had human fathers who corrected us, and we paid them respect. Shall we not much more readily be subject to the Father of spirits and live? For they indeed a few days chastened us as seemed best to them, but he for our profit, that we may be partakers of holiness. So our Father is not limited by time. He can keep spanking us for our whole life. And also, our Father in heaven is not imperfect as our human father was. He's perfect. So we have a perfect Heavenly Father who can keep on disciplining us. And the final verse 11, now no chastening seems joyful for the present, but painful. Nevertheless, afterwards it yields peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it. So when you go through the trials and the difficulty that God brings your way, at the end is a beautiful work of a greater character, greater godliness, a greater holiness in our life. David says it like this in Psalms 118, verse 18 and 19. For the Lord has chastened me severely, but he has not given me over to death. And then he says this next. Open to me the gates of righteousness, and I will go through them, and I will praise the Lord. So when he went through it, he realized, oh man, I'm so glad that my character is better. My tongue is better. My thoughts are better. My life of righteous living is more in line with what God wants. I'll enter into those gates joyfully of righteousness.